So, this is just a little bit of a Thunderf00t unplugged, expressing his true disdain for the state of politics in England, because I've not spent a long time in England over the last probably 20 years actually. It's been limited to a week or two here at Christmas. I've really not been that much in touch with British politics, but recently, because my dad's got cancer, which is what those things are up there, that bright ring thing, that's cancer. Yeah. That ain't so good. So I spent a long time in England and I've caught up with British politics again, and of course we've got this election which goes down tomorrow. Don't know when you'll watch this, but so the first thing that strikes you as crazy is you've got this map of England and they strip off all the seats that are going to go one way or the other, and you're left with this sort of really light spattering of the seats that actually matter. The swing seats, as it were. You get a similar thing with the states in America, but you know, these are much more finely contested, and so it turns out that, you know, unless you actually live in one of these counties that can go either way, there's almost no point in voting. This is one of the shortcomings, of course, of the first past the post system, and so that's one of the problems. Is yeah, well, what does your vote really count for? I mean, you can sort of put in the protest vote, but what's that worth? And then you look at what is there to vote for, and oh my word, has it been depressing watching British politics. You know, it really is almost becoming it's a refined sale, a refined product that's being sold to you. Everything is a carefully staged photo op. The politicians are almost never allowed out in public because people might ask them unscripted questions, and you know, they all have their prepared backgrounds and they all read off their teleprompters. And Churchill once said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute discussion with your average voter. And you take a look at politics, and that's basically what they're pitching towards, with the most callow arguments. Now, a lot of the time, okay, you know, it's politics, you expect some rough and tumble, but some of the things that they're willing, I mean, this for me was the deal breaker with Labour. That's the sort of equivalent of the Democrats in America. It's run by this guy called Miliband, who, this was the one that got me. The price that Ed Miliband is prepared to pay to win the Muslim vote. Labour leaders pledge to redefine Islamophobia as an aggravated crime, will be cheered by child sex grooming gangs in Rotherham and election stealers in Tower Hamlets, referring to a couple of cases recently where when these people get criticised, they basically wave the flag. It's because it's racism, and the answer is no. No, it's not. Islam is not a race, it's an ideology, and governments shouldn't be in the business of telling you what ideologies you cannot criticise. And that's basically where Miliband's going here. If you can't criticise Islam in a way that they don't like, is that all you've got to do for your religion to prevent people from criticising it? Just define criticism of your religion as a hate crime. And that for me is a complete deal breaker, because you take a look at the history of civilizations. Typically, once you get into this dogma type thing that some ideas cannot be criticised, then you get to this intellectual stagnation. You just can't get beyond the ideas you cannot criticise. And if they're as inherently flawed as some of them in Islam, then your society's got a real problem. And I would even go so far to suggest that, yeah, a lot of the stagnation in the Muslim world is due to the fact that they are prohibited from criticising certain concepts. And for those who think that it's just some sort of minor problem of, you know, a bunch of people who, small minority, only a small minority of extremists, they're never really going to use this Islamophobia law to prosecute anyone. This was a Channel 4 survey done that said, asked the attitude, I had to start from the beginning, 28% of Muslims agreed that they dreamt of a Britain one day becoming an Islamic state. And then there's a comment afterwards. Again, it was worth putting this into proportion. I'm sure many evangelical Christians would dream of the day when the whole world would embrace Christianity, which is maybe true of evangelical Christians, but we don't have many of them in England. Indeed, the number of churchgoers in England's about 10% or something. It's bugger all. Anyway, so it goes on. Asked about the attitude towards free speech, there was little support for freedom of speech if it would offend religious sensibilities. 78% of Muslims thought that the publishers of the Danish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad should have been prosecuted. And 68% thought that those who insulted Islam should be prosecuted. 62% disagreed that freedom of speech should be allowed if it insults or offends religious groups. Basically this is the path back to the Dark Ages. And of all the things that will really be a real deal breaker for me if I'm going to vote for someone, that's it. Right? I'm not voting for someone who is going to actually say there are ideas that you cannot criticise. That's a complete deal breaker. And then you take a look at who else is on hustings. We've got the Conservatives, they're the sort of British Republicans. And it's a guy called Cameron, who's as vapid a politician as you can get. And they've made some really dumb mistakes. Well, the one that really bugged me actually was the thing with the aircraft carrier. So Britain doesn't have much of a navy these days. A couple of aircraft carriers, that sort of thing, and they were sort of getting a bit old, bit long in the tooth. So they thought, right, let's replace these old carriers, and it was done immensely badly. Right, so the first thing you've got to decide as a nation is, do you actually want to be able to put your planes on a ship, sail them around the world and fly off and launch strikes? And there is a reasonable argument for having something like that, that if you don't have it, it takes a long time to get it, and if you've got Somali pirates or something, these things are a real deterrent. And of course, you can, how shall we say, be a good ally in NATO with this sort of thing. The carriers that we had, they flew Harriers, which are a really very good aircraft for what they are. And they decided, right, we're going to scrap those, so they scrapped all the Harriers, and so it's one of these crazy things that the new carriers are going to come along, but there's going to be no planes to put on them. And it's going to be 10 years after we get the carriers that there'll be planes to put on them. And the whole reason for getting this in the first place is there was an immediate need to have the ability to put aircraft on planes and move them anywhere in the world. And of course, if you live without it for 10 years, is there really an urgent need to have this? Anyway, it turns out that then the planes that they're going to put on them is the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, which is plagued with problems, doubtful. There are significant question marks whether it will ever work as advertised. It seems to be walking down the path of the Raptor, which was another one of those ones that just got more and more and more expensive. They did eventually pull the plug on it, but by the time they did, it was the most expensive fighter in the world. Yeah, I think that was another one of those ones that couldn't fly in the rain. Vulnerable to small arms fire and all sorts. Anyway, so the F-35, the dream is that it's one plane that will do absolutely everything. It will be your ground attack aircraft. It will be your fighter jet. It will be your strategic bomber. Now, there's an immediate problem here is that virtually all war machines are a compromise of three factors. There's the ability to move quickly, so it's speed, armour, and firepower. Right, that's the typical compromise. You get it with tanks, with warships, with planes. Now, the more constraints that you put on there, the harder the less specialised the machine becomes. So you get this sort of jack of all trades, master of none, and that's if you're going for a fighter, that's really not what you want. If you're going for a ground attack aircraft, that's not really not what you want. If you're going for a strategic bomber, that's not really what you want. So there are the Joint Strike Fighter has been asked to do basically everything, and I wouldn't go so far to say it's impossible. But from what I've seen at the moment, it's extremely doubtful whether this thing will be a solid replacement for all these aircraft that it's going to replace. I mean, the selling point is it's going to be a fifth generation, almost magic fighter. It's going to do everything with technology, so it doesn't have to be manoeuvrable. It doesn't have to do all these other things. It doesn't need long loiter times or anything like that. And that's a lot of faith to put in technology that doesn't exist yet. So that's what they're going to put on the carriers in 10 years' time. So yeah, the Conservatives, no. Then you get to the Scottish National Party, and if I had time to edit this, which I don't because I go to hospital tomorrow, but if I did, I would cut in for the Scottish National Party, and they want independence of Scotland, and so they want this referendum. You know, we want to be an independent country. And it's been crazy. Like the population of Scotland is comparable to the population of London. You know, both about 6-8 million people, something like that. And you got to ask yourself, is that really worth actually all hassle splitting this stuff into extra countries? But I still think that, like I said, if I had time, I would cut in this wonderful scene from Trainspotting where there's Renton going on about Scotland, how it's shite being Scottish, we're the lowest of the low, the scum of the fucking earth. Some people hate the British, not me, they're just wankers. We, on the other hand, are colonised by wankers. Can't even find a decent race to be colonised by. Anyway, so it goes on. Anyway, so I think there's an argument for doing this the other way around about should the rest of the UK have a referendum of whether we should expel Scotland? You know, because it's the presumption that, you know, everyone else wants them to stay. Whereas the Romans built a wall to keep them out, you know. No, I'm just kidding. It just, the Scottish nationalists, it just seems, is that really the biggest issue that you think faces your country? So yeah, that's the Scottish National Party. The English nationalists, the UKIP. So they make some noises which I think actually have a legitimate point, and that's along the lines. Some of it's this sort of anti-Miliband stuff that we're not having blasphemy laws, okay? Technically, I think they might be in the books still in England, but you know, no one's been prosecuted under it for a long time. At least I think that's the way it goes. Anyway, it might be on the books, but it's not practiced. And yeah, the idea that we should be walking down the path of prosecuting people for pissing off the religious, I think is just crazy. But there's also this element that if you're going to get large-scale immigration into the country, as a long-term traveller, the rules of engagement are when you're in someone else's country, it's basically you do like the Romans, right? When in Rome, do like the Romans. And whilst it's kind of nice to bring some elements of the culture, especially the ones which blend in well, Sharia law is just not one of them, right? Sharia law is the sort of thing that we can live without anywhere in the civilized world. You know, this sort of, oh man. So I was just listening to the news today, and I think it was Afghanistan. There was a woman who was accused. That's right, she was a female rights an activist of some sort, and she told some street seller, "You can't sell these fertility charms because you're just basically milking the ignorant." And so they accused her of blaspheming and burning the Quran, and so they stoned her to death, drove cars over her, and all sorts. This is the sort of, these are not good ideas that you want to import into your country, okay? So there are elements like that I like. Farage, he's the leader of the UK Independence Party. Looks like he's a bit of a nutter, control freak, goes into big shouting tempers. Not thinking of anyone else in particular, but doesn't sort of instill confidence in you. And yeah, okay, and then you got the Liberal Democrats who are, can't we all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya? Yeah, it'd be nice, but and I look around, and for me, I've had a lot of dealings with the National Health Service recently. It's not up there, is it? No. Okay. And the one real problem that it has is it's trying to do too much with too little money. And the practical upshot of that is it's dysfunctional. Really dysfunctional. Now there'll be many out there who'll say, but the NHS is a marvellous institution, done lots of wonderful things. I was treated wonderfully by the NHS, and that's true. I mean, the NHS is the 5th largest employer in the world. With an organisation that size, you're going to get some success stories out of it. But you only have to look at how it functions on a fairly close level, and it's terrible. Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be is if you've got anything urgent. Look, typical way it goes with the NHS. You go down, you say you got a problem, and they'll schedule something for you next month. That's when we can get you booked in. And then you take a look. If you can do it privately, you can basically get it done tomorrow. And so the NHS, it was born in the age when medical health care was mending broken legs, giving people aspirins for headaches, and so on. When healthcare for the nation was actually a fairly cheap proposal. Now the problem is that technology has taken us on so far that basically everything is treatable. And so I think realistically, if you're going to have something like a National Health Service, you've got to be honest. Yeah, there's only so much you can efficiently do with the money, and if you try and do more with the same amount of money, all that you end up doing is frittering your time away in bureaucracies, which seems to be where a lot of it's going. Anyway, so that's my little bitching fest about the state of politics in Britain. Yeah, so if you're going to vote tomorrow, good luck.